Hi, everyone. This is your host, Susan Rosen, and I have a special guest today who is here from Ireland. Her name is Mary. I always get it wrong.
Howick.
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 Okay,
Yes.
sorry. And Mary has had a very interesting life. She had spent more than 30 years in leadership positions within large multinational financial institutions, which is impressive enough. Been a single mother, which is also very impressive. She has spent time after being in the business world to go out and start looking at what other places that she could expand into. And she has become a Reiki master, qualified psychotherapist, a facilitator of the Isha Judd system, which she'll tell us about later in the podcast, and as a stress management coach. She's also had a brush with cancer, which we'll talk about as well, since this is a health-oriented podcast. Has also been trained as a 3 principles coach, which is where I met Mary, because we're both in a similar, the same group having to do with the 3 principles. And she has really dedicated her life now to living it mainly from her own place of inner peace, well-being, and clarity and joy. And she has a mission in life now to lead people into the space of inner peace beneath the chatter of the mind, where they can access the enormous power and clarity of who they really are. I really like that. I had to make sure I got that in there. So welcome, Mary. It's really a pleasure to have you here on my podcast.
Thank you so much. And it's a pleasure to be here with you. And thank you for that long introduction. It indicates the age I am and how much life I've actually lived.
Well, I was going to say, that's just, I don't mean to interrupt you, but I'm going to, is that I think the people you're talking to are probably not too far off, or may actually be past you, like I am. So we all appreciate, probably more than a lot of other people would, what you've done and the amount of time that you have spent in doing some of these things. So go ahead. I'm sorry.
And this funny thing is, Susan, I'd have to say, at the age of 61, it's probably the happiest I've ever been in my life, and my favorite age ever. And yeah, for sure, I'm living in a space of peace and well-being most of the time now. Not all the time, obviously, but a lot of the time. And it definitely wasn't always like that, when I was in stressful leadership positions and at the same time raising my son and dealing with staff challenges and customer challenges and child challenges. And, life, there was just so much going on. And I always was someone that kept a really good front on. I would have been a really good poker player. I never actually did play, but I think I would have done very well. And we accumulate so much stress, at certain stages in our lives. And I look back, and like I always had a spiritual side to me as well. I was always searching for something. Mm-hmm. And some of the things I did alongside my career. Like I trained as a Reiki master, and I studied psychotherapy, and I did a lot of things alongside my career. In some ways, they probably kept me sane. And I also, had learned a lot about manifestation and the power of our mind. And I found that to be very, very true. And I would try and focus on what I want and not focus on what I didn't want. And you mentioned there that at one point I had cancer. One of the things I definitely didn't want was cancer. And it was rife in my family, like both my parents and most of their siblings died of cancer. So it was something that our generation, were very aware was rampant in our family. And my way to deal with that was to totally ignore it. And I thought, well, if I don't focus on it, it'll never happen. But what I didn't realize, that my determination to not focus on it was actually a type of focus in itself. So if there was something on TV that mentioned cancer, I'd turn it off. If there was an article, I wouldn't read it. If there was a conversation, I would leave it. So my very determination to avoid it was in itself almost an obsession.
Interesting.
Yeah. And also I would have been very health aware. I would eat organic food, I would have exercised, I would have drank alkaline water. I would have basically done all the things that you're supposed to do. And so I was pretty shocked when I was diagnosed. And I really, I couldn't understand how it could possibly be when I had seemed to take all the necessary actions to avoid it.
Right.
And just before the diagnosis, like a few months before that, I'd come across, you mentioned Isha Judd, I'd come across her. And she's an Australian woman who actually had an enlightenment experience and lives now from a place of an understanding of life that came out of that experience. And she created a system to help people connect with who they are and to, with consistent practice, lead them to something near the experience she has herself. And I had met her and gone to her center, and we had really clicked. So when this happened, I thought, I'll contact her and see what she says. So, I contacted her and said, why would this happen to me? Why, when I'm doing everything right, could this possibly happen to me? And she went, there's no point in asking why. She said, sometimes things just happen. And the important thing is, rather than to fight with it, to accept this is how it is. And something that I became aware of is that I really had fought a lot with everything in my life. Like, I was a very determined lady and I wanted things to be the way I wanted them to be. But there's a lot of efforting in that.
It is. It's tiring.
And so I was the same with this. It's like, it's tiring. So it was the same with this. It was like, how dare this happen to me? How could this happen to me? So I was armed to do battle. And so what she said was, no, just accept this is how it is. And she said, I can't tell you why, but she said, if you practice the system and go within, you may have insight for yourself. And what I realized, like, part of the system is about coming in touch with your emotions and then moving your emotions, tools to move them. And I realized I was so cut off from my emotions. Like, I had suppressed anger and sadness and pain from throughout my life that I'd never let myself probably feel or look at. It was like my approach to cancer, just ignore it and it'll go away. But it was all stored somewhere within. And my son had left home a few years earlier to go off to college. My relationship was breaking down. My career was going very well, but I had a real sense of, so what, what's the point of it? What's the purpose now? And I had lost purpose in life, and I was pretty full of resentment and stuff. And I realized that was probably a big contributor.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah. And so with the system, I started moving all that. And as I was doing that, the medical process was obviously going through. And the good news was it hadn't spread. It was in my bowel. It hadn't spread.
Wow.
They were able to operate, and the operation was a complete success. But I nearly died in the process because there was complications in the operation and a really bad infection set in.
Oh no.
So I was in hospital for about 7 weeks. And at one point, my organs were all closing down. Like, it was really, really, really bad. And again, one night I was going to bed and I thought, okay, this really now, I felt so weak. And they were planning an operation the next morning. And I thought, I probably can't handle that. And I sent a message again to Isha, and she came back to me and she said, Mary, surrender, completely surrender, stop fighting, give up, surrender to whatever happens. And amazingly enough, I did. probably as a result of her energy and the calm that she brought, I did actually surrender and fall asleep.
Yeah.
And the next day the consultant came in and said, he said, Mary, I don't know what's happened with your immune system, but it suddenly just kicked in. And he said, when it kicks in, my God, it kicks in. He says, your bloods have totally changed and we're not going to operate.
Oh my
and you're
goodness.
going to be fine. You're going to be fine. We'll just keep you on antibiotics and you'll be fine.
Wow. Oh my God.
And so after that, I just said, well, I went back into corporate and I was going, I can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
And so I retired because I was old enough to retire happily. And I went off to Uruguay to Isha's center, and I spent 2 years in Uruguay and a year in Mexico working with her.
Wow. Yeah.
And it was amazing. Yeah.
Yeah. That must have been, boy. Tell us a little bit about that, and what you were doing. I mean, what kinds of practices and kinds of things.
So the actual system itself, it's based around, they're like meditation, but it's not really meditation because it's geared to bringing you into contact with your inner self so that you have that throughout the day. Whereas often with meditation, it's something you do and then you leave it when you walk around.
Right.
But this is more to access who you really are and to bring that into the day. And then alongside that, there's a set of tools for dealing with and handling your emotions. And so what I was doing in the center was a combination of helping run the center, practically cooking and cleaning and so on. And then also working with students, running groups, supporting people one-to-one. And it was amazing, seeing people coming in with all kinds of life circumstances. And South America, some of the stuff coming in and some of the things people have gone through were quite horrific. But watching them transform over a period of time and then leave again. So it was really, a privilege to have that time and have the opportunity to actually go and be there. But then I started to crave coming back to Ireland. There's something about your friends and your family, and especially if you have a son, I just wanted to come home again.
Yes,
and so
I'm sure.
So I came back, and I came back then, and I teach the system, the actual Isha Judd system, but I was looking for something else to do as well, and then I discovered Jamie Smart in London and the work of Sydney Banks, as you know.
Yes.
And Sydney is also this incredibly enlightened, wise man who brought such wisdom to earth.
Yes. I totally agree. Yeah. And that, it's one of those things. I mean, luckily there are tapes and things of him talking and the books that he wrote, and there are a lot of people who knew him, but boy, wouldn't that have been an experience to have been able to hear him live. That just would have been truly mind-changing.
And Susan, I even find when I listen to his stuff out on YouTube that it touches me, and I get insights just listening to him, even online. But I can imagine in person how incredible it would have been.
Yeah. Although from what I understand, I mean, the electricity of it comes through, like you say. I mean, I think everybody gets touched by it, but it's still, you always think, in person it would have been even better. And maybe that's us putting that onto it, and but I think it's not necessarily true, right?
I think you're absolutely right. Also, what I have realized through the training I've done with Jamie in the 3 principles and in what I did with Isha in Uruguay and Mexico is that there really is this source that's just common to everyone and everything. So like, it makes sense to me that it doesn't matter if the person's in Mexico and I'm here. It doesn't matter if the person spoke in the past and I'm in the year 2020. It's like this one, and Sydney Banks would call it the mind.
Right.
that's consistently there, and there's, we have access to everything from that space. And so we
Yeah.
can get touched. Yeah, we can get touched by something Sydney said 20 years ago.
Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's I think, interestingly, thinking about it, that actually if you can see all of the lineage isn't the right word, more of a line, actual line between and across all of the different spiritual practices that are out there, over the last couple hundred years, really. And the people who really, I mean, even like you were talking about meditation, I mean, when you look at somebody, say, like the Dalai Lama, okay, I mean, the meditation has done that for him, right? Maybe the rest of us may not have gotten to the same, as deep of a place, but then we haven't really spent our lives to that same degree. Because I know that I got a lot of that just from the Buddhist meditation and the sesshin and practices, and when just sitting there and you're not talking, and the same thing as you were saying that you were doing, cleaning and cooking and all of that, at the Zendo. And I just think it's so interesting because you can go to all of these different cultures and they all have their own spiritual traditions. They call it something different, but at base, most of them all have the same kinds of practices and the same kinds of mindset. And the thing I find a little bit different about Sydney Banks's, about the three principles, is that it's built around actually taking it out into your life, into your daily life. Whereas a lot of the others, the others actually are starting to teach more of that now. But for a long time it wasn't. It was, if you're in the Zendo, you're supposed to walk out with it and take it with you. But it's so easy, especially if you're working or whatever, to get in there, and it doesn't, all of a sudden you're in that, and all of the other is kind of behind you. When you go home, maybe you get back in it, but when you're at work, it's like a whole different, because I know I had that a lot too. But I find that with the three principles, it's just, it goes with me, and I do things, or I think things, or whatever, and it isn't until I look back on it, a week later, and go, oh, that's why I did that. Oh, okay, well, yeah, I let go of that. That's amazing. Kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love everything you said there, and I totally agree about, it's like with the three principles, you see something differently, and you don't, like, for me, often I don't even realize that something has changed.
Yeah.
And exactly what you said, you look back and you realize, oh, I behaved differently there than I normally would, but there's no effort or no system or no technique. It's just you're seeing things from a different place, and so automatically you're responding differently.
Yeah.
And it's incredible.
Yeah, exactly. And it's, and I find that it's even difficult for me to try and explain to somebody what it is. I haven't gotten to that level of expertise, if you want to call it that, to really be able to communicate it, but people still seem to get it. I was talking, I'm taking over the podcast here.
Please.
We'll be right back to you. but I just all of a sudden it occurred to me, I was talking with someone who I didn't even realize he wanted to talk to me as a coach, and I didn't realize that was why we were having this conversation. But anyways, we were talking about it, and I got into the whole thing with the coaching. He was asking me about it, and I started talking about the three principles, and more, I think people can appreciate it more if you talk about it as an inside out kind of way of living. And he got so impacted. He was just like, how do I learn more about this? How do I mean, and turned out he was telling all of his friends about it afterwards. And I mean, he just, I was totally amazed, and we connected really well as well, which was good. But I had never quite seen, and maybe it's because he's a lot younger than we are, but I had never seen anybody kind of react in that, or maybe he was just open, just ready for it.
Mm. And that can be the case. Sometimes we're just ready, but it's like we're all searching for the same thing, whether it was Buddhism or whether it's meditation, or everybody's looking for this space of well-being and peace and love. There's this, it's like a love that underlies everything. And at some level, we know it's there somewhere, and we're searching for it. And we're usually searching outside, that somebody else will give it to us, or that the job will give it to us, or if we have enough money, we'll buy it.
Yes.
But the thing is, we have it already when
Right.
we just calm down and relax. And what you said, I find it hard to explain it. And it's like you almost can't explain it. It's like a feeling that you fall into. And sometimes when you're talking to someone, which is what happened for that guy, obviously, you fall into it with them. And what I love about the three principles is it makes it so simple and everyday. And it's not just for the people that have time to meditate or to go and live in the center. It's here for all of us.
Yeah.
And it's who we actually are. And that's what I love, just that realization that that's who I am. I don't have to try. I don't have to work at it. And if I let all the efforting go, it's like what's left is that. Yeah. And I realized that's what Isha meant when she was telling me surrender. Stop fighting with life and let go. Because it's like when we let go our thinking and our fighting with life, then we fall into something that's able to actually look after us.
Yeah. And that really is, it's not just so much necessarily just within us, because what's within us is the same thing that's within all of us. Right?
Exactly.
It's not my little piece of it and your little piece of it. It's really accessing that wisdom that's in the universe. I mean, it's just in life overall. And I think, and it's, we don't need to get all the way into religion and all that kind of stuff, but I think it's kind of interesting that if you think about it, that really is what most of the religions have always tried to say, but people couldn't hear it that way. And so they always had to come up with somebody or something that they could say, okay, there it is. Now follow this person or follow that, or right, in order to get it, which is kind of interesting. I don't know whether we've all evolved past that. Well, maybe I shouldn't say all, because obviously there's still a lot of people who need that. But for some of us, we've kind of evolved past it to understand that it's just there for everybody.
And you're right, there seems to have been a big evolution even over the last 30 years. Because I remember when I was working and I was interested in anything spiritual, they thought I was completely crazy. Like it just, people didn't get it at all. Whereas now, there's mindfulness in most workplaces.
Yes.
And in schools, and it's so accepted now. That
Yeah.
it isn't just for the guru, and it isn't just for the Pope, and it isn't just for whoever, it's for all of us.
Yes, yes. And it's not just for that week that you go and sit in the Zendo, or that week where you go and fast, or you know, you it's there, and it's a part of your life.
And those weeks can be very nice, and it can be really, it
Oh,
can
yeah.
be a lovely way to treat ourselves. And sometimes there can be the way to fall into it, but for sure, that's not what it's about. It's like, if something isn't useful in your day-to-day life,
Mm-hmm.
then it becomes one more thing that you have to do.
Yeah.
Jamie talks about this as being subtractive. And I love that, because I have
Yes.
never before had something that gave me less to do and less to think about and less to worry about. And that's just brilliant. I'm so into that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's interesting because, listening to your story, you can see how your route from the working and family and all of that, and then starting to kind of go put feelers out to other things, whether it was Reiki or psychotherapy, right? Um, and then to do the thing with Isha, I can't remember her last name.
Isha Judd, yeah.
Judd, thank you. Um, was another foot into that whole thing, and that even and then you know I'm a true believer that we bring things into our lives that we need, and then we find out later why it is that we kind of needed it, because it pushes us in a direction or teaches us something or whatever. And I kind of see that in your story as well, because I see the cancer being that kind of a thing. You were kind of dabbling, and the cancer, you just, kind of said, okay, no, you got to go full in on this.
I'm so grateful for that cancer,
Mm,
because it has totally shifted the course of my life. And I feel I'm much more authentically myself now than the act of being the professional lady that nothing ever bothered.
yeah.
And like, I see it as a gift from life. It taught me something else as well that's of so much value to me. And that is that things are never actually as bad as what we fear they're going to be.
Mm,
And I've also heard that spoken about in the three principles.
mm-hmm.
Really, we always have everything we need to deal with whatever's happening in the moment. But when we're obsessing about things in the future, we never build into our thinking the resilience that we have, the wisdom that will come, and the support that will be available to us at the time. And I feel like, someday I am going to die of something.
Well, yeah, kind of.
But I think we're all going to probably.
Yeah.
But it's like I have absolutely no fear, because I know whatever happens in my life, I'll deal with it at the time. And I'm not going
Mm,
to waste 1 second of my valuable life worrying about something that may or may not happen out in the future. But it's a different now. It's not like I'm not going to think about it, I'm not going to read about it. It's like, no, it doesn't, it's not going, I don't care. I can read about it, I can listen to it, I can sit with somebody and be there for them. But it doesn't mean I'm going to worry and fret for myself, because I totally know that I'll be looked after at the time, that I'll cope, and that it will be okay, because we always actually are.
yes.
Like
Yes.
we look back at all the things we've worried about,
Oh, yes,
and
don't
now we
we?
can't even remember what they were.
Yeah, exactly. Well, that has to do with age, huh?
Yeah. It can be very useful sometimes. Oh, for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I go to a
Oh.
movie, and my son goes, "Oh, did you see that movie? What was it about?" And I go, "I have no idea. Days ago." And I went, "I can't remember, David." And he's going, "Mom, why won't you tell me?" And I've gone, "No, really, I can't remember." They just don't get it.
Yes, I totally get that one. I can have a conversation with someone and it's like, okay, I remember the main points. I remember what I needed to get out of it. The particulars are a little hazy. And my husband's always like, God, why can't you remember anything? It's like, well, how long do you have? I'll give you you want the long explanation or the short one?
I remember at work, I used to be able to 1,000,000% trust my memory. I could
Yes.
go anywhere and be so
Yes.
sure if I remembered it, it was like that. And then suddenly I started to realize, oh, maybe I don't remember that right. I was pretty shocking.
Yes.
I think it
Yes.
was like 55 or something. I started to say, I can't depend
Menopause.
on it anymore. Yeah.
Menopause.
Yeah.
It's totally um, we stop getting those hormones and
Mm.
um, I've been reading even more and more about it lately and it really it it really is like a shock to the system and especially to the brain. We just don't get the brain doesn't get what it needs anymore. Um, so yeah, it's I'm trying to do a little more digging around on that and trying to see what kinds of things to, because I certainly don't want to go on hormones or any of that kind of stuff. That was bad enough
No.
being on the pill, let alone
Yeah.
the
I agree with you. I'm not in favor of that either. I must say I feel really good now. Like
yeah.
I probably don't remember as well as I did, but it doesn't really matter to me.
Yeah.
I can be organized. I can write down the things that I
Oh
need
yeah.
to remember,
Yeah,
and
thank you. Yeah.
a lot of things aren't worth remembering. We're better off forgetting about them. And
That's a very good point. That's a very good
yeah,
point. Yes.
yeah.
Yes. I totally agree. I totally agree. And there are things you can do. They have all those brain games and stuff that you can play on the computer and that supposedly help. I've never done them long enough to actually see whether
No,
they work or not.
me either. I'm a big believer, though, that if we're happy
Yeah.
and present in the moment,
Mm,
that uh, and we have access to that inner wisdom, that we have everything we need.
yeah.
Like we have more than we ever had when we've access to that.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I remember one time I used to worry about, oh, what if I lose more memory? Really, I don't worry about it anymore. And yeah, it's.
Hmm. No, that's a good point. Yeah.
I think sometimes our worry about things is worse than the thing themselves.
Oh,
Because
that's
I know
always.
for me, yeah, when I started noticing that my memory wasn't as good as it was, I really was freaking out initially. Whereas now
Yeah.
it's like, but it's okay, everything I need to know, I know.
Yeah. Yeah. I still can get home. I still find my keys.
Mm.
The
Yeah, and
important thing.
if I've forgotten the row I had with my neighbor 3 years ago, hey, goodbye, no problem.
Exactly. There you go.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, exactly. So, okay. Well, we have covered a lot of material, I think,
Yes, we
given
have. It's
people a lot
been,
of things to think about. Um, so, is there I don't know, is there anything else that you'd like to talk about or to say kind of wrap this up in the next, 5-10 minutes or whatever?
Well, as you said, I think we did cover a lot of ground. And I suppose if there's one thing that I'd want to say is that life is really simple. And I look back and I realize how much I complicated it. Trying to be better than I thought I was. Trying to pretend I was what I wasn't. Rather than knowing that, I was always okay just as I was. And that it was okay to be vulnerable, and it was okay sometimes to be angry, and it was okay sometimes to be sad. It was okay sometimes to not know what to do. And I never knew that. I thought, that you had to be a certain way. I thought that I wasn't good enough and that I had to pretend to be more. And it's like now I've fallen back into who I am, and I feel very comfortable in me. And the interesting thing is the world hasn't fallen apart. And I realized nobody else was actually judging me, just me.
Right. Yeah.
And that really we make up the rules. Like we can be any way we want to be, and the world accepts it.
Yeah.
It was in my own head. Everything was in my own head.
Yeah. And it's not only just the rules. I mean, we make up our lives.
We do. Totally.
And one of the things that I've learned that is really I don't know, it's just made a big impression on me, which is that we all see and hear everything differently. So, if I go to the supermarket and I see something, then somebody else is there and they see that. Let's say somebody falls or somebody tries to steal something or whatever, right? And people come in and ask the other person and ask me for my version of the story. It really is my version and her version. And when they've done tests on this, they've done experiments on it, doing that, where they have videotaped something and then asked, 5 or 6 different people who watched it, what happened. None of them got it right. Not one. And so that's why they say, eyewitnesses are totally unreliable. Because we all see literally through our own eyes. And we change it. And the brain changes it. So
and it just
sorry. Go ahead. No, that's right. Go ahead.
No, it just shows how little sense there is in trying to convince someone else of something we think is true.
Yes.
So many rows and arguments, and really both people have different perceptions of the event, and that's okay. And actually, one of the lovely things I got out of the training with Jamie is to be curious about why the other person sees it as they do. So rather than trying to convince them that you're right and they're wrong, it's more go in and see why. How do they see it like that? And that's really fun.
Yeah.
It's a really fun thing to do.
No, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
Like even in relationships, suddenly, rather than arguing over something, it's just to be curious. And then the other person feels so heard. It's lovely. Yeah. Like that was one thing that I really loved from the training.
Okay. I'll have to remember that. usually I just say, yeah, we're seeing it differently. And then I, never mind.
Well, I guess that works too. It's where you're trying to beat them into submission that isn't so useful.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's always that time when they'll say, oh, well, well, you said you were going to do da 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 da. It's like, I don't remember saying that. I don't remember, agreeing to that. It's like, no, I know you did. That's what you said. Well, that's interesting. because I don't remember that. So yeah, yeah. Well, I guess that's one other way, as we were saying, that where not having as good a memory is a very good excuse for a lot of things now.
It is, yeah. Even though I've let myself off the hook on consistency, I now allow myself to think one way one day and think differently another day. Whereas before I would have been very rigid. I would be like, if that's how I'm seen, I'm never going to change from that.
Yeah.
Whereas now I go, yeah, I thought that was a good idea back then, but now I don't think it is, because so it's okay. It's okay to not be totally consistent forevermore.
Yes, exactly. It's so much more fun this way.
Yeah, really. Yeah.
And kind of zig and zag instead of going this way, even when you're falling off a cliff.
Yeah, if I was to use one word to summarize what I've gained, I'd say it's freedom. Freedom from having to be any certain way.
Yeah. Oh no, absolutely. And I think I really think too that the experience you had with the cancer was just so transformative.
Yeah,
And it allowed you to do all of these things and see all these things fresh.
Yes, for sure. It kind of was like a reset button on my life. Yeah. What I thought would be the worst thing in the world turned out to be one of the greatest gifts in my life.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Wow. Well, I think that's probably a good place to wrap this up.
So, I really enjoyed talking to you, Susan.
Hey,
lovely.
You beat me to it. I was just going to thank you for a wonderful conversation, and I'm very happy that you agreed to come on my podcast.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Yes. So I'm going to add my little ending here that I always have, which is that I am not a doctor, and this is not medical advice. And if you are having any kind of medical issues, please go see your doctor and or the emergency room if it really is an emergency. And I will look forward to talking to all of you next week.